Let's talk about what the Democrats have done. I mean, if Trump had drawn it up in a dark cigar smoke filled room, he couldn't have done much better than to get all these Democrats running down to embrace this MS-13 gang member, wife beater, Abrego Garcia. But they're doing it. The best video I saw online was someone used AI to show Chris Van Hollen, Senator Van Hollen of Maryland, dancing with the MS-13 guy, Abrego Garcia, in the like a waltz together. Sometimes AI is used for good. But they're running down there to embrace him, Steve. And while we don't know what's going to happen on the legal battle for Trump, he's had a setback with the Supreme Court this past weekend. PR-wise, politically, he's winning this, isn't he?
He's winning it, but I would say it's a quite brilliant strategy I think they're doing, because this is not about the criminal gangs. Clearly, they're embracing these people, and the American people are 80-20 against that. But their overall strategic goal is no mass deportations. Under Biden's watch, we have at least 10 million illegal alien invaders here. If I was running their operations, I'd kind of do the same thing, is delay and deny, block Trump on the most egregious. If they can slow us down, Megyn, on MS-13, if they can slow us down with the Venezuelan gang, if they can do that, when do we actually get to the mass deportations? And here's what happens on the deep state. You talk about, exactly. First off, we'll wear them down. We'll change the public. You know, the Wall Street guys will come out and say, we need these guys for the economy. They add 2% to GDP. The wages are low because of this. They are most focused on the 10 million because they want them here as essentially indentured servants, but also as voters. That's why we got to keep the eye on the prize. And honestly, they've slowed us down. They've used the courts, but let's talk about what happened in the courts. President Trump used the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. One of the predicates of that is actually make the case for an invasion by a foreign power and using these gangs. The deep state came out over the weekend with a national intelligence estimate kind of leaked to the press to say, hey, the community, over at DNI, they're doing this internal analysis, and it doesn't support that at all. This is what's happening. I think the Democrats are playing their cards smartly, although for most people, they're sitting there going, how can they embrace these guys? They're embracing the worst of the worst to slow us down and getting the worst of the worst out. Now they got us jammed up in court. They got President Trump's the energy, the attention, and nobody's talking about the mass deportations. You wait till the bill comes up for the reconciliation, where we're asking for $170 billion to rebuild the infrastructure, the ICE, and the logistics to get people out of here. That's going to be another firestorm. So I think we got to double and triple down. You're a lawyer. I'm not. I think there's President Lincoln, held up a habeas corpus in the Civil War. General Washington was all for it, and a couple of times, after he became president, about the situation we have with the French Revolution and some of the French people over here. I think you've got to get much more on everything we're doing on taking down the deep state and going after this aspect of it. I think we have to double and triple down now. There can't be any retreat and no pushback. And quite frankly, the courts have got us jammed up, and I think we got to look at other alternative methods. And I think there's got to be a challenge. There is a constitutional crisis right now. My point is, go maximalist on this, and let's bring it to a head, and let's bring it now so we can get to the mass deportations. Otherwise, the Democrats are going to win.
Yes, I totally agree with that. We talked about the numbers just the other day. They were 10.5 million before Joe Biden took over in this country. And now you've got the Center for Migrant Studies saying, well, now they estimate it's about 11.7. Way more than 1 million came in under Joe Biden. In fact, CPB estimates it's more like 8.2 million. So now you're talking, to round up 20 million illegals here, 500,000 of which, a little less, are said to be also extra criminals. You're a criminal if you came in here illegally, but then committed other crimes. And that's what he's starting with. So they've been doing a good job of stopping it legally. But how can Trump could, in the Abrego Garcia case, literally under the best, totally, what's the opposite of the straw man? Strong manning, the other side's argument. I'm a strong man, the other side's argument. The absolute best they can argue about Abrego Garcia is that he's entitled to be flown back to the United States, brought in front of an immigration judge who can then say, that gang you were fearing in El Salvador is no longer. Therefore, the suspension of removal to El Salvador is lifted, and now you have to go back home. And then we fly him home. That is literally the best case scenario for Abrego Garcia right now. And this is all this time and U.S. senators and energy expended on this one man's case. Forget the fact that he's a gang member, allegedly. Forget the fact that he's a wife beater. It's all interesting, but it's irrelevant legally. All you have to prove is that he was here illegally and deported, which he was. He was. All that happened, except the court said, but not to El Salvador, because he's convinced me he's going to get killed if he gets sent back there. So all we'd have to do is fly him back here, have a little hearing where they said, you know what, that threat is no longer existent. You're going back home to El Salvador. Done. But the reason they won't do it is what you just said, because you do that for the one, they've won. The ACLU has won.
If we do that, and I don't like the fact he's been transferred from CCOT. I don't like the direction of this so far. This is the worst of the worst. And look how the media's embraced this and made this guy a hero. The reason is it's about due process. If, in their concept of these invaders, if we bring him back for that hearing, it's over. It's over. It's over for the sovereignty of the country. It's over for the country. You're never going to get to the rest of the criminal gangs. President Trump, I think, came out on Truth Social today. Megyn, look, you know this 1,000 times better than I do. I think he said the calculation that the ICE guys have done is 200 years. You'd have 200 years to even get to the criminals, not even to the 10 million. Just the due process hearings you would have to have it over and over again. So I think we have to take a hard line on this. I think Stephen Miller is 100% correct. I think we have to take a hard line, and I would like further action. I just think now's the time to do it. I do believe, and I think, look, the Supreme Court to come out at 1 o'clock in the morning in the dark of night over Easter weekend and put out a ruling, and then have Justice Alito put out his opinion was blistering to his colleagues. We have now, this thing's up at the Supreme Court, and there's a civil war in the Supreme Court. On the conservative side, not even talking about the progressive judges, that we've allowed, and these guys are now feeling empowered. You're going to have lawsuits on tariffs. You're going to have lawsuits on every action President Trump's going to do. To delay is to deny. And they're playing it masterfully. The Justice Department is overwhelmed because you only have so many lawyers.
Yes.
We have to lance the boil on this. Otherwise, the legal insurrection of these neo-Marxist judges is going to win just by overwhelming us. And that's why I think it's more and more direct and tough action.
I just don't think anybody is accountable other than the Trump administration, but none of these courts, and we're not effectively making the point, I guess, enough to the judges or the appellate court judges or the Supreme Court, that every single one of these came into this country without affording anybody any due process. No hearing was held to allow them. No application was filed to allow them. They just broke our laws. Why can't we just afford them commensurate due process with that they afforded us in coming into the country? Shouldn't it be a quid pro quo? It should be a match. If you filled out forms and we erroneously said you could stay here, now we're trying to deport you, you get your full hearing. But if you broke our laws to come here, why do you deserve anything before we get you out of here?
Megyn, you're arguing law, constitutional law. You're arguing logic and the rule of law. That's what I'm saying. This is not about that. You can make all those arguments and they don't care. Boasberg, look, on the unitary theory of the executive, where President Trump's the chief
It's President
executive,
Boasberg to you, Steve. Please show some respect.
No, but this is my point. He stepped in the middle of President Trump's primary responsibility, being commander-in-chief of the armed forces and being commander-in-chief and taking an oath to God about the national security of the United States. He stepped in the middle of it and now is setting up a record of criminal contempt charges, of which, as you remember, I went to prison. They're trying to do the exact same thing around people around President Trump. This is so obvious. This gets back to the Pentagon. Folks have to understand this deep state. This just didn't occur overnight. This has been 40 or 50 years. All those generals and field officers and civilians have been around forever as part of the deep state of the Pentagon. They're just not going to have Pete Hegseth come in with President Trump's ideas and a handful of people and say, oh, this is terrific. Why didn't we think of this? The same with the judiciary. Look at the radical nature of these judges. You're the lawyer. You're a constitutional lawyer. You know how outrageous some of this has been. It's post-constitutional. That's what the American people, and particularly MAGA, has to wake up, I think, even more to and say, hey, look, we're not playing by the old rules here anymore, because they're going to bury President Trump in that way. And that's why I think we have to be even more aggressive and more outside the box. And I think this legal insurrection, and you see this at the Supreme Court of the United States, to file something in the middle of the night at 1 o'clock in the morning and then have Alito so furious that he puts out his own opinion, which throws a couple of sharp elbows at people, his colleagues, and the colleagues he was throwing a sharp elbow at was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Roberts. right?
Yeah.
So
and not a single Trump justice
now.
voted to stop it either. Not one of the Trump justices voted on. It's not that they're obligated to vote on his side. It's just if you are a conservative justice and you're opposing both Alito and Thomas, you've done something wrong. Tariff war, stubborn inflation. No wonder gold has been routinely hitting all-time highs. In volatile markets like the one we have now, don't sit on the sidelines with your head in the sand. Take control and safeguard your savings. This is why so many people are turning to Birch Gold Group. They've helped tens of thousands converting an existing IRA or 401k into one in physical gold. Is it time for you to hedge against the economic instability with gold? Just text MK to 989898 to find out. Birch Gold will send you a free, no-obligation info kit. Text MK to the numbers 989898. A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Countless 5-star reviews. They've helped so many protect their savings. Check it out. Text MK to 989898 today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.